Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, I wanted to do another episode on lessons in insanity. And I've been reading quite a bit lately about the Spanish Civil War that took place from 1936 to 1939, and just to kind of give you some really brief background. I know that from an observer's eye, just a very, very brief idea of what a lot of folks have about the Spanish Civil War is that it was a war by the Republican-led government, and now don't misconstrue that for Republican forms of government in the United States versus what was taking place in Spain at the time. But they called themselves the Republicans, and then obviously you had the Nationalists, which a lot of times were labeled as fascists. And the Republicans obviously also were labeled as communist, Marxist, socialist. So you on the Republican side of the equation, the elected liberal democratic government was a composition, kind of ironically, a multitude of leftists. You had Marxists, you had communists, Marxists, socialists, anarchists, and then on the nationalist side, you had the Phalange, you had monarchists, Carlists, members of the military, and an average, ordinary, everyday kind of conservative, religious Spaniard who was concerned about. And that's one of the reasons why they kind of gravitated towards the Francoist led government at the time, which eventually won the war. But what is really interesting is again some of the aspects. If you really kind of get into the down deep and look at the why behind the war, and it was really a war between the left of society and what you would call the right of society, and it was eventually a no middle ground, so to speak. And then I look at what's happening right now in the United States, and there's a lot of things that are very, very similar in my point of view, in terms of what happened leading up to the Spanish Civil War. And there are quite a few things that are happening right now inside the United States that lead me to believe we are on that trajectory as Spain was during its time of civil upheaval and eventually civil war. And that's very unfortunate. Before I start, I think this is very, very important to kind of get that to the front and center of in terms of either whoever's watching this and wherever you sit on the political spectrum. If you're a Democrat, a Republican, independent, what have you. So it's very, very important for American society, American government, that we have two thriving political parties. Now I know there's talk about the United States would probably be better with a third or even a fourth robust political party, and that's possible. But right now we have two major parties: the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, and it's very important that even if you are a diehard Trumpist, or you perceive yourself as an American nationalist or a neocon, a paleocon, whatever you see yourself as, it's very important for the good of the nation that, and this is going to be kind of hard for some of you to swallow, that us as the United States has a thriving Democratic Party, a Democratic Party that is rational, reasonable, and attracts a lot of those what I would define as the center or the center left of the political equation, and maybe depending on who is running for that party, because I think we're very divided right now in terms of partisan politics, but we should be in a space where if a middle of the road conservative Republican were to see a reasonable and rational Democrat that, I don't know, maybe he's for the working class, and what he has to say is something that may resonate, then absolutely that Republican should be able to vote for that Democrat, and vice versa as well, in terms of a Democrat voting for a Republican. Now the problem is we're, and it's really unfortunate for the Democratic Party, we're really starting to see that party start to adopt some very, very radical views, in my opinion. And I think they're adopting some views that it's not good for Democrats. If you identify yourself as a member of the Democratic Party and you're a registered Democrat, obviously you have to be concerned about some of the things that you're hearing and some of the things that you're seeing. And I think if we go back in time to the time of Roosevelt, and maybe prior to that and after that, JFK, what have you, those guys have to be rolling in their coffins right now in terms of seeing some of the things that they're seeing, especially in terms of the transgender movements. I mean, really kind of focusing on, oh boy, probably what consists of 0.02% of the population, and that percent of the population is probably, in all likelihood, suffering from a significant mental illness, which is gender dysphoria. And unfortunately, for some reason, the Democratic Party is making this into a very, very big issue that I don't think the majority of the United States is behind, and it's going to harm the party. And at some point, we could see a big shift, and I don't think the current president is doing a very, very good job for a number of reasons. But it kind of goes back to that 1936, and really kind of before that, 1936, what was happening inside of Spain. And there's one thing that really, I would have to say, it bothers me, and we're kind of seeing it repeat itself in terms of what is happening now inside of the United States and what happened in Spain. So in Catalonia, in areas like Barcelona in northeastern Spain, we saw that during the Civil War and prior to the Civil War, 1936, it was again, the Civil War was a slow burn until it really kicked off from 36 until 39, the military coup that occurred in 36. But in Barcelona and a lot of other cities, you really saw this gravitation from a liberal democracy towards what something would look more like far left socialism, or and then towards the end, which really kind of sunk the Republican cause, was the gravitation towards communism, and some really paranoid communism with some really, really bizarre views and forced that were really kind of designed to take down traditional society, which, a lot of Spaniards were Catholic and at least religious or moderately religious. And some of the things that we saw in Barcelona and elsewhere, where they were changing, meaning the left, was changing the use of words. So saying senor or senorita, and calling your wife, your spouse, was something that was basically made illegal, and you were not allowed to do that because that could label you as a Carlist or a a, a sleeping member of the Phalange that just happened to be kind of behind enemy lines, and that is what they were doing. So we were seeing this really this culture war taking place. That's very reminiscent of what is happening right now inside the United States. You see the patriarchy, the war against the patriarchy, the concept of, like, just for instance, if I were to go, depending on the company that I work for in the United States or a governmental entity, as you are writing a email correspondence, at the end of the body of your email, where you would say your name, maybe your title, and then below that, you are now required to identify your pronoun: she, her, him, whatever. And it's really bizarre, and it's something I think that's kind of going back to a thriving Democratic Party. It's good for the country. It's good to have a reasonable and rational two-party system. That's the way the system works. But the party that right now is condoning the gender pronoun identification, and just really this bizarre, and I have no idea why they're doing it. Well, I think it's control, and it's unfortunate. And just to kind of compare and contrast, we saw that take place inside of Spain, and I would have to say that if the Republican government in Spain, the liberal democratic government that ruled Spain, would have not taken that journey into the far leftist road, then things might have looked different. Maybe a lot of people would not have gravitated towards the Phalange and supporting the Carlist and this amalgamation of varying center-right and far-right groups that eventually went to war with the left in Spain. And that is why it happened. People in Spain, or a lot of different folks, really kind of left reason behind them. And that is why we saw what we saw inside of Spain. But if you want to really kind of read about the Spanish Civil War, I'd encourage you to do that. If you're interested at all in terms of what is happening now inside of the United States, and if you want to read about history quite possibly repeating itself, I would highly recommend digging deep into the Spanish Civil War. Obviously, there are things that were very, very different inside of Spain as opposed to the United States. There's not a big Catholic movement inside the United States, but there is that religious equation that could play into any future breakdown in civil society in the United States, leading to a civil war. But again, a lot of what we saw in Spain is just very reminiscent of what's happening right now in the United States. And again, I would say don't view the Spanish Civil War as there was this military coup d'état that in which these fascists, this very few fascists, ended up for some reason winning the war because they were backed by Nazi Germany and Mussolini's Italy. I mean, that did occur, but at the same time, the quote-unquote Republican government was also backed by the Soviet Union and a number of other nation states as well. And again, ultimately, I think those in the middle started to become very, very concerned. They had the Red Scare and what have you. Very reminiscent of what's happening right now in American society. I can't tell you how many times I've driven down the road And I've seen cars that have been decorated with anti-Marxist slogans, and really now those individuals perceive the Democratic Party, as this far left organization, and unfortunately, that's what it's quickly being identified as by a lot of those in the middle. And we could find ourselves in a situation where the nation continues to become very, very divided. And there is, at some point, some sort of catalyst that really is the straw that breaks the camel's back. And we end up in a place, meaning we, citizens of the United States, end up in a place where we really don't want to be. And as you look at the military aspects of the Spanish Civil War, Spain at the time had a population of about 25 million people. And so then you have probably about 12 million males. And towards the end of the Civil War, or at its peak, you were looking at roughly 400,000 to 600,000 fighting personnel on both sides. So a million fighting men and women that was the composition of forces, which would it would equate to 1 out of every 10 males that had ended up joining the military. So if we get to that point in the United States with a population, slowly heading towards 400 million people, what would that look like? How many people would be under arms? And given the amount of firearms that are in the United States, probably 450 to 500 million guns are in the United States. So you see current events taking place with some of the school shootings that have happened and other mass shootings, and you hear for the changing of the Constitution, changing of the Second Amendment. Well, look, the toothpaste is out of the tube, and the idea that you're going to start some sort of gun confiscation is just ridiculous. I mean, there's so many guns out there in society right now that it's just something that isn't realistic, and compounding that, a large portion of the United States is against it. They don't want to see the Second Amendment abolished, and they don't want to see gun control. And I don't think, personally, me, that it is guns that is causing this. You have to understand that we really didn't see this sort of thing that is happening now occur in the 1950s, 1940s, 30s, 20s, even when during the Great Depression. You never saw, and the stress level was incredibly high, and you had other times where the stressors were very much present in society. And you did not see the type of mass shooting events occur then as you do now. And again, guns were always present. They're always here. But what's different? What has changed? In my opinion, it's three different things. Is one is the access to incredibly violent video games that children and even young adults are able to go out there and engage in. And these are brutal video games. They're sandbox video games where, in some cases, such in video games such as Grand Theft Auto or that Cowboy Dead Red or whatever the hell it's called, you can go out and you just kill people. That didn't exist. Another issue is Hollywood. Hollywood really kind of comes down on guns, and they obviously lean far left. But what do they produce? They produce incredibly violent movies that are just horrific. I mean, even Hollywood has produced mass shooting event movies that almost portray that person as a hero. There's a movie, I believe it's called Rampage, where there's this guy who dresses up in this armored suit and goes out and just kills people. And that compounded with those violent video games where you can just completely be desensitized to violence and killing. And then finally, most important, you have Big Pharma and kind of the breakdown of the family, where you're seeing a lot of kids being put on these psych drugs that we really haven't. I don't believe we truly understand what it does to the brain. And what you have with these three elements: ultra-violent video games, ultra-violent movies, nonstop desensitization, in conjunction with these pharmaceutical psychotropic drugs that kids and young adults are taking, have led to where we're at now. That's the only thing that is different between now and in the past, when guns existed and we didn't have these events. We didn't see these types of video games, these types of ultra violent movies, and these big pharma psych drugs. Just didn't see it in the 80s, 70s, 60s, 50s, 40s, 30s, 20s. You didn't see it. It wasn't until the last decade or two decades, 3 decades, whatever it was, going on 3 decades, that we have seen what we're seeing now. And that's the only difference. And that's just my take on it. But kind of got sidetracked on that a little bit. Didn't mean to, but I did. And whatever. But if you get a chance, dig deep into the Spanish Civil War. And right now I'm reading... What am I reading? It's Homage to Catalonia, I believe it is, by Orwell. Yeah, it's Homage to Catalonia by George Orwell. And obviously he went on to write 1984 and Animal Farm. And there was a reason for that, because George Orwell spent time in the some of the international type units that were fighting in and during the Spanish Civil War. So he got to see firsthand the craziness that eventually happened on the Republican side of the equation, the liberal government that eventually went far left into the realm of paranoid communism. And unfortunately, again, as you delve into the Spanish Civil War and see some of the things that occurred during the Spanish Civil War, you will very, very quickly see that some of those same things are now happening in the United States. And it's very, very concerning. But I think I went on long enough. I hope everybody enjoys the video. And if it's just too much, just turn me off and don't listen to me. You have that right. Have a good day, everybody.